So our first guest is someone who means a lot to me, and that's the Napster founder and board member, Mr. Shon Parker. Please welcome him.
Breaking rocks in a hot sun. I fall for law in a low world. I fall for law in a low world. I needed money.
I also want to introduce a very special guest who's a member of one of the greatest rock bands of all time. And it's a band that's achieved so much with 8 Grammy Awards and more than a dozen multi-platinum albums in counter. And their influence is really incredible. I actually learned how to play electric guitar to one of their songs. So I'm also really excited to announce that starting today, all of their music will be on Spotify. And that's something that I wanted for a very long time. So I'm honored to welcome him and call him my friend. Here's Lars Ulrich from Metallica. And here's also Michael Hogan again from the Huffington Post to moderate this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this is fun. I feel like we're going to have a lot to talk about with this group.
A lot of history here.
Yeah.
We're gonna work some of our issues out.
Yeah, this will be like a group therapy session.
Exactly.
Some kind of monster too. But I want to ask you, for starters, what are we announcing here exactly? What's the news break?
So what we're announcing is that from today, Metallica is now available on Spotify, all their stuff. I've been waiting for this for a very long time.
It's a day that would never come. Right?
Yeah. So for those who may not be familiar, if that's possible, let's talk a little bit about the history that you two guys have together. Maybe, Shon, you can start by telling us the first time you saw Lars Ulrich in person.
Oh, that's an interesting question. You know, so the first time I ever saw Lars was standing in our office at Napster, standing with Sean Fanning, as these trucks full of boxes with, I think it was like 280,000 names of Napster users that were infringing Metallica's copyright were delivered to the office. And actually, Lars and I sort of caught a glimpse of each other walking through the hallway.
Hi.
Very briefly. And
Hi, Sean.
yeah, it was, and then we didn't see each other for
too long.
For 12 years.
Yes.
12 years.
So you guys were real adversaries. I mean, there was a lawsuit. It was, and there was a lot of kind of hard feelings on both sides. I mean, can you?
Well, we were made out to be adversaries.
Uh-huh.
And when we finally connected again about 6 months ago, and we sat down, and Sean walked into Metallica's HQ in Northern California, within a couple hours, actually within a few minutes, we could feel that there was that we were really kind of had been put, that we were adversaries, but that we had a lot in common, and that we felt that that we had much more in common than we realized at that time, and that us sitting down together was long overdue, and that, you know, we were younger, and we were maybe somewhat ignorant to what was going on in the real world, and we certainly, you know, got caught up in a lot of things in that moment. But when we finally sat down and had a real heart-to-heart, we realized that we actually had a lot more in common about that whole thing that happened 12 years ago, and it felt really good.
Did you have a conversation where you kind of saw the other person's point of view differently?
There was a lot of listening going on.
Yeah.
and we just realized that we were, that obviously, yeah, I mean, we tried to see it from the other side, and as you referred to, there was a movie a few years ago where I got lectured in some of that. But you know, we just sat down and went through what happened, and sort of, there was a lot of things about my experience that Sean did not know, and there was a lot of things about Sean's experience that I was really not aware of.
Yeah.
And a couple hours later, Sean walked out of Metallica's HQ, and we really felt that there was a partnership in the future. And
We then became roommates.
and a few hours later, Sean called and invited me to come into San Francisco and have a few drinks. And when I walked into Sean's house in San Francisco, there was another guy there named Sean, and his last name was Fanning. And so I got a chance to catch up with both of them for the first time in many years. So that was a pretty big night back in April.
Sean, what was it like for you and Sean Fanning meeting Lars after this time?
I mean, I think, to echo Lars's point, I felt like our position had always been incredibly misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And what we realized in meeting was that not only was our position misunderstood vis-a-vis the public, Metallica's position had been misunderstood as well, and that we were actually more alike in the kind of common misunderstandings that we both had to endure over the years than we were different. And certainly our perspectives, whether or not they were the same in 1999, had converged in a really interesting way. Back in 99, 2000, we were depicted, Sean and I and the company, we were depicted as these greedy pirates that basically were just trying to, create a free-for-all and enable the, wholesale stealing of music. And when we started the company, that was sort of an idea that was very foreign to us. It wasn't something we'd considered. We just wanted to make music more free, as in freedom, not free as in theft, right? And so it was, when the media, led by the labels and their watchdog organization, the RIAA, began to sort of mount this publicity campaign against us, we were very taken aback by it. I mean, we're 19-year-old kids. We really started the company when we were in high school, and we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. We were suddenly thrust into the limelight, doing interviews, talking about, and our position was represented in this polarized and really one-dimensional kind of way.
And at the time, you had the dream that you had was that you could license music and provide a legal service that.
Right, and this was actually really important. It was one of the things that was lost in all the conversation about like Napster and Napster versus the music industry or Napster versus Metallica. It was, from the very beginning, we wanted to build a licensed, legitimate music distribution service, and we thought that was just always on the verge of happening, that it would make a lot more sense to transition this 100 million user population over to a completely licensed environment. And
Lars, are you buying this? Do you
that would have saved.
I've heard this story a couple of times.
Yeah.
I buy it. But I think the interesting thing is that what Sean was just saying, that he used the word that you were being labeled as being greedy. I was being labeled as being greedy.
Right.
You were thrust into the limelight, as you say. We were thrust into the limelight. That, so many of our parallel experiences, we realized were the same.
Well, you guys were tarred as anti-fan, and you felt that was unfair because you had always allowed tape trading, recording.
Yeah, I mean, Metallica had, we've always been considered ourselves outsiders. We've always lived in our own little bubble. We've always kind of kept the record company at bay. And when you live in your own little bubble, the main thing that you want to do is have complete control over what you're dealing with and how you relate that to the fans and how you get your music to the fans. And so we'd always been pro-bootlegging. We've always advocated people to show up at our concerts and tape our shows and trade them and put them out on bootlegs. As a matter of fact, when I started Metallica, I went to the post office every day for weeks and sent cassette tapes out to people in the tape trading underground. So they would go 20 tapes to 20 different people who would copy them, and 20 other people, so on and so forth. And that's how you would get it going.
Dan, does this remind you of Spotify and what your business model is?
Yeah, I mean, we see exactly the same thing now. Like, a lot of us listen to music, share it on Facebook. A lot of our friends discovered, in turn, listen to it, and then share it on to more friends. So it's kind of like the tape sharing thing, but on crack.
It all comes full circle, right? Yeah, it all comes full circle.
So Lars, why now? Why sign this deal with Spotify? Were you guys holding out for the right deal, or is there something else?
No, we were, last week an event happened that we've been gearing towards for a long time, which is that we basically took control of our whole catalog,
right.
Took control of all our masters, and basically for the last 15 years, November 30th, 2012 has been kind of the big day. Mm-hmm. And so that happened a week ago. We got it all back. We have our own record company now. We have 100% control of everything that we've ever recorded and everything that we will ever record. And it just so happens that this event coincided within a week of that. So it was perfect timing. And it wasn't actually planned. So
that gives you the control to make a deal like this without having to
yeah,
go
we,
through a record.
I mean, without being disrespectful to the record companies and so on, we just wanted to get to that date and have a clean slate and be able to sort of start over. Obviously, as we've been gearing towards this date for the last couple of years, there are so many different options out there, what to do with your material once you control it and once you don't have to ask other people's opinions or permissions what to do with it.
Right.
And so we wanted to see what the best options were out there. And obviously Spotify, the last couple of years, has really solidified itself as not just the leading music streaming service, but pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, the only one. And you know, with Danny's team and with the whole kind of the global reach, I think it's really important that you guys, especially here in America, understand that Spotify is really a global entity, and Metallica obviously works on a global basis too. So with the kind of reach and with the team that they have, we were ready to jump in as soon as we took control of our own masters.
And Sean, you looked around the world for a service that you wanted to invest in. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I became very much obsessed with
Not me, but
I became very much obsessed with I stalked you relentlessly for which actually is not that, that's actually not that far from the truth, is that for a decade I had remained convinced that there had to be a solution to this problem of creating a viable economic model for the distribution of music. And I believe that music itself has inherent value, but also that consumers should pay for music. And we had to create a model where paying for music was significantly more convenient than stealing it. You know, you can do a lot to make piracy less convenient, poisoning the networks, shutting them down, litigating them, but you've also got to build a system that makes it far more convenient and far easier to access the music you want. And I've always believed consumers are willing to pay for it. In 1999, you know, we were pitching models that were, in some sense, precursors to the model that Daniel and his team, you know, ultimately arrived at. And I never could have predicted in 1999 that it would take a decade for the record labels and the publishers and the sort of bureaucracy of the music industry to figure out that they were going to have to take some pretty radical actions. Back then, when we tried to propose anything that in any way resembled, you know, a free tier of service with ad support, and then this idea of paying for portability and paying for accessibility on all your devices, you know, they looked at us like we were completely crazy. Why would we give anything away? Why would we have any kind of, you know, every single experience of every single piece of music should be, you know, absolutely controlled? And it was that intensity around DRM and control that held them back for such a long period of time. And then I never could have imagined as well that in this company that would ultimately solve the problem, founded by Daniel and Martin, was going to be a quirky little Swedish company that had taken over the European market, you know, proved that the model worked the hard way by actually doing it in a couple territories and gradually expanding it, and then, you know, ultimately Daniel allowed to let me join the board and invest in the company, and the team went out and tried to get our U.S. licenses. I think at the time we thought it would take about 6 weeks. Took a couple years.
And 6 weeks.
And we're now we're here in the U.S. And
Daniel, I'd like to ask you, you know,
Sure.
there are still some big bands out there that aren't on Spotify. What would you say to folks who are maybe contemplating making a move like Lars and Metallica just did?
well, again, what we saw with Metallica, which I think is just amazing, is that there are people now that are growing up to streaming music services. That's the only thing that they're ever going to see. So the fact of the matter is, in Metallica's case, you know, I know 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds that are listening to Metallica as much as I know 50-year-old people who listen to Metallica. It's just one of those iconic bands. And the ones that are left out, I will point out...
The ones that are left out don't have children yet.
Is that the difference? Is that what happened?
Or maybe not
No, but obviously
grandchildren.
I have a 14-year-old and 11-year-old, so when you see the way that they interact with music in 2010, 11, 12 versus the way that we interacted with music, back in the day and so on. Obviously, you want to keep being, relevant and keep, never putting yourself in a place where you're not available to everybody that's out there. But having kids for me, really made a big difference, and it's. So maybe that's just what it's going to take.
Yeah,
well,
hopefully not.
The economic model also, in some ways, is geared toward bands with big catalogs, right? Because you don't just buy it once and then listen to it forever. Every time you listen to it, there's a type of a royalty. Is that right? Am I understanding that?
Yes. Every time you play something on Spotify, we pay. But I don't think it's just about having big catalogs. I think it's really about creating great music. Like if you think about it, the songs that we listen to today that were written 5 years ago or 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 50 years ago, we still keep listening to them. That's what I said earlier when I meant, that new artists today, they're competing not just with all the other stuff that's out there that's new, but really with the history of entire, all music,
right. Sure.
which is a pretty big thing to compete against.
You made some interesting points when we met in Marin at the headquarters. You made some really interesting points about where, the reason that you guys chose to sue Napster in the first place, and that was, I think, really eye-opening for me, in particular this point about control and.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that was the great point that got sort of misunderstood back in 2000 was that it was never about money. It was just about control. In order to exist in your own little bubble and be autonomous, you have to control all the elements around that, and that control was taken away. And like we've talked about many times, if Napster had come to us and said, "Hi, what about this or what about that?" we would probably have been pretty open to looking at some different options. But we were so, that the control option had been taken away from us, and then it sort of turned into as far as we were concerned, a street fight. It was like, you fuck with us, we'll fuck with you, and, and so let's meet in the back alley over there. And then obviously you guys were very smart.
Luckily, it never quite came to that.
Yeah, you don't want James Hetfield against you.
No.
I've learned that the hard way. But
he's a softie, though, really.
Now he is.
Yeah.
But I had a point there.
The communication factor, the fact that there was this.
Well, no. At that time we were, obviously because of our stance, we were very pro giving our stuff away.
Right.
And if we had ever, and we talked about this, late at night over a few drinks, that if we had ever had a conversation back then, the whole thing may have turned out different. But we were so, it was so weird. We were writing and just writing a song for the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack called "I Disappear." And we were going to give it to the record company, but we hadn't picked which version of the 2 mixes. And so we left the 2 mixes at the recording studio, a smart thing to do. And a couple of months later, right before we were going to pick which version, I get a call from my manager saying that it's being played on the radio in St. Louis.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. And it was like, how did that happen? Well, there's a company called Napster, and then it was like, well, maybe we should go and rough them up a little. And then, what I was going to say was that you guys were very smart in that you took that fight, global, and then it became, instead of being Metallica against Napster, it sort of became Metallica against its fans, which was never the fucking point. And we just wanted to control what was going on with our music because that's what we had always done. Because we had always kept the record companies and all the business entities as far away from what we were doing because we did not want anybody polluting what we considered to be the purity of Metallica.
And so much of this was either the media or the label, the labels or representatives who trying to turn you guys into a poster child for their sort of holy war against us and trying to represent us as being these demonized entities that just wanted
where's
just wanted
Barry
piracy
right now?
But there was one clever maneuver that you pulled, right? Didn't you guys have a kind of a heart-to-heart about this? That there was a message you sent out to fans that really kind of helped.
Yeah, well,
I'll let him explain that one.
All right. I mean,
Since we're here,
since we're here,
everybody's got beers, right?
no, I mean it was it did become a street fight in a sense, and this was part of the escalation of it where.
We'll
We will get back to Spotify momentarily.
This is great.
We had to choose how we wanted to monetize. I mean, how we wanted to interpret the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and we were told we had two options. Actually, there'd never been a test case of it before, so it wasn't clear how to interpret it. But one of the options was, we could try to just remove those tracks from the Metallica tracks from each individual user's collections, which seemed like it was going to be a little more difficult. Or, we could remove the users themselves under this law, this esoteric law. And we chose the latter of those, which gave us the ability to pop up a little message on everyone's clients that said basically you've been banned by Metallica.
That's very nice.
Anyway, the lesson of the story is that when you have two parties that are set up in opposition to each other, as you escalate, you start to think of the other person's perspective as being much more polarized than it really is. And to your point, had we just sat down and talked about what our intentions were in launching Napster in the first place and what our dreams were. I mean, our dream was that making music social and making it more accessible. Every time access to music has become more convenient, whether it was the shift from vinyl to cassettes or cassettes to CDs or CDs to MP3s, each and every step along the way, there's been more consumption of music, and the music industry, the business, has grown. And we believe this, in a way that was in some sense too ideological. And I think that was the naivete of being a 19-year-old kid, trying to figure out how the world works, trying to learn everything for the first time, not even really understanding the vocabulary of the recorded music business.
But because the music business has obviously shrunk since the Napster days, whether it's responsible for that or not, but do you think that it can come back to the size it was at before?
That is actually, that's the reason why I'm here today, and that's the reason why I went looking for someone like Daniel Ek and Martin and the entire team at Spotify for so long. I looked at every single, once I became an investor, after Facebook, I started looking at every music service, one after another. I saw every pitch on every company. And none of them had the unique combination of talent and also the right fundamental business model around music. And the idea that accessibility and portability to devices is a critical point where you can monetize music. Most of these companies were just taking the plain vanilla deals that the record labels were making available to them. And this company knew that product and consumer experience and fan experience had to dictate the design of the software, and also had to dictate the deals. And so they were very, very stubborn in a good way. And they went out and they got the right deals that have enabled Spotify to be as successful as it has.
Lars, you talked about control. So do you think that Spotify gives you the control that you want as an artist?
Well, I think, when I was first introduced to Spotify about 3-4 years ago, I was just stunned at the ease of it, and sort of, so you sit there and you've heard so many stories about all these other companies, but it's blah, blah, blah. It's not so easy. And, when I was first, doing the Spotify thing, it was just like, wow, this is so easy and it's so user-friendly, and it's set up for the fans, and to try to make a situation to be as effortless. If you're going to stream, if you're going to listen, you want the practical part of the experience to be effortless, and that's what these guys have, at a whole nother level than any of the other guys.
Are you looking forward to comparing the number of bars that your song tracks have to other rival bands?
No, I would never do that. I would never do that, but it's a nice, if an artist was that way inclined, it's nice that you guys offer that.
Daniel, if you had a wish list and Metallica, sign Metallica, get Metallica on the service was on there, what else is on that list?
Well, I of course want every single saying Slade. I want every band in the world to be on Spotify. I want all the music there because I believe that At Spotify, we just want people to consume more music and share it with their friends. And by doing so, we know that the music industry will get back to where it used to be, and that artists can really create, once again, these records where they can spend 5 years doing the record they want to make. If they want to have a live symphony orchestra, they can afford to do that on their albums. That's what I want to have. I want to have the imperfections of the live recording and not just all computer
But how
stuff.
do we get to there from here where, you know, there's been talk about the amount of revenue that artists are getting.
Right.
And you know, what's your vision for getting to the place where you can help people fund that kind of creativity?
Sure. Well, we really focused this company on growth. So if you look at just our past 9 months, we're paying out $500 million back to the music industry.
Right.
9 months ago, we've doubled that in the last 9 months. So for us, it's really just keep growing. And we know that if we had the scale that some of the other music services has, you know, we would be at a double, if not triple, music industry than what it currently is today.
Okay, last question. What was the song that you learned electric guitar to, the Metallica song?
Enter Sandman.
Enter,
Of course.
All right, this was great. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much.
That's good.
All right, then. Follow that.
Metallica now finally on Spotify. Big round of applause.
Tell everybody to add Metallica to their playlists.
Add Metallica.